Good afternoon, everybody. I'm your host, Crystal. This is another edition of the 9 O'Clock Meltdown podcast. And over phone, I have the wonderful and talented husband and wife duo, Har Di Har, Dooley and Andrew. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Wonderful. It's so great to have you guys back on. You just released a new album. You've got a little one in tow now. What is going on in your world? Lots of amazing things and lots of good things, it seems like.
Yeah.
Well, it's our first baby, so it's hard to not say that's pretty much the majority of what's going on in our world right now. From a physical standpoint, that's pretty different.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And now I follow you guys pretty heavily on Instagram as well. And in one of these last posts, Andrew, I think it was you were kind of equating to creating an album and making an album almost like having a child, and kind of the joy it brings and the nervousness it brings and things like that. Do you find that this album is a little different than the others you've put out, or is it similar? How has that changed for you?
Well, I guess
A loaded question, I know.
it's one of those things that I'm reflecting on a lot, because I think one of the first, tours we did when we started in 2012 is when we came up and played in what was the place in Duluth? Or was it Superior? It was in Superior.
It was in Superior, yeah.
And we did the interview on your show at that point, the very start of Har Di Har. And I feel like every time we released an EP, it was like we were trying to prove something with it. And just like having never gone through the cycle of, writing, arranging, refining, rehearsing, recording, and then, after that, marketing a release, we've never gone through that, or it was just really fresh for us that with every release you have this balance of trying to navigate both healthy expectations and trying to deny expectations at the same time. Like saying, I don't care how it's received, but really, you do. You put so much time and energy and thought into something that it does feel like it's like your brainchild. It's like you have all of this stock in it, and we set out to play music full time, to make a living doing it at that time that we did that interview, and every single release was this giant momentous sort of thing that we tried to scale our expectations down, but ultimately we were trying to achieve this thing. And this release that we just did, this EP we just put out is coincidentally going to be the last Har Di Har release, as we know in the form we know Har Di Har as. So we kind of were like, we really don't care about the outcome of this. We're not trying to prove anything. We're not trying to do something in a sense of if we achieve this, then we can get into these venues, then we can do these things, then more people, it's like there was no ladder that we were trying to climb in a music scene or we have nothing to prove. So yeah, that's, I guess, a really long-winded way of saying we just really love these songs that we have been working on for a long time. And we came to the conclusion that we wanted to put it out, and then as a way to put a stamp on the project.
Okay. And Andrew, something interesting you just alluded to is Har Di Har over? What's happening? What's going on? Oh my God.
I guess you want to take that, Julie?
Yeah. It's kind of like we've gone back and forth on, is it over? Do we repurpose it? So I think symbols are really big for us, and we we were in an apartment for many, many years. Most of the time that Har Di Har was a thing. Mm-hmm. We were in an artist loft, and we just recently bought a home. We found out we were pregnant. We bought a home, and we recognized we didn't have to buy a home. We could have absolutely raised our child in the artist loft apartment that we were in. And, but there was something symbolic about putting an end to that chapter and who we were when we were there. We went through such transformation through the pandemic, and just felt like we needed to put like a physical end to that chapter of our lives by moving out of the apartment and moving into a house and starting a new chapter where we're like more physically, just that physical symbolism. And then of course we're like having a child and raising a child. And the same thing I think for Har Di Har, like it represents, it didn't feel like, okay, this is the project that just continues with us for the rest of our lives together. Like, it actually represents who we were at the time, the 8 to 10 years that we were doing the project. Some of the things Andrew alluded to, just like our growth as people through trying to make it, in the music scene or whatever. And we want to continue doing music together, but we don't really want, it just felt like symbolically we needed to end Har Di Har and start fresh, close that chapter instead of trying to repurpose it and, deal with maybe some expectations. We just wanted to start fresh, sort of like when we buy a house.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's one way that I guess we're not saying Har Di Har is done, period. We're never doing anything ever again as Har Di Har. It's not a closing the door. It's more of a turning the page on the project, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But we always were like, what is Har Di Har? What is it? And I think in the 8 to 10 years that we were doing the project, what it really was is us figuring out a lot of things. I mean, and that's not to say that we're not still figuring things out, but we really used it as kind of external processing for some areas of, we needed to navigate we were kind of lost in some areas. And so it sort of acted as that vehicle for that. We don't feel lost anymore. And so it's like, what would be the purpose of continuing it? Because actually the purpose of it is done. It served its purpose, and now we'll do something else.
Right, yeah. Right. Okay, I'm tracking. I think something else that you had mentioned on your Instagram as well was you started Har Di Har almost as a way you started your marriage. Or if I'm reading into it correctly here, please correct me if I'm not. Kind of through Har Di Har, you use that to kind of figure yourselves out, figure out your relationship, figure out your marriage as an external outlet for things that were going on internally or things that you needed to figure out internally. And now with this new explanation that I got of, buying a house and starting a new chapter in your lives and things like that, I can understand, that Har Di Har was back there and it doesn't necessarily serve the purpose that it did. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
No, I think that's I think you read into it correctly.
Yeah.
Not to get super neo-political here, and let's talk about all your Instagram posts. Absolutely not. That's not why we're here.
Yeah, but and we wouldn't even remember what we wrote. So, I think I think fairly early on it became especially with our last album. The first few EPs really were us trying to figure out what we were trying to communicate. And I think that I was mostly writing lyrics at that time. And they were just sort of abstract. Honestly, I listen back and I'm like, I don't even know what I was trying to say.
We were listening to one of our first EPs and we're like, what is this song about?
What does this even mean? And I think for me, I was trying to work out some spiritual things in my life at that point that I didn't really understand, and just whatever. And like I said, I still don't really know what I was trying to say, but And then with our latest album, or actually our only full length, which is We Will You, that we released in 2017, that really became, I mean, our relationship was not well. And that became a real, like, for lack of a better term, like therapy to that. We just used that to work through. Well, I wouldn't even say we used it to work through it. It was just a snapshot of where we were at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the lyrical content is almost 100% surrounding our relationship and things that we were questioning and thinking about and struggling with and things like that. And that felt right, I think, for it to be that. And this last EP, we sort of combined the two thoughts. Like, through the pandemic, we really came on the other end of both of those struggles. Like, we came out on the other end of both the spiritual struggles we were having and the marital struggles or relational struggles. And the EP that we made together, Done, this last one, is really a bookend to both of those, like a coming together of both of those things and a bookend to them. And it's like a microcosm of us working those two things out at the start of the pandemic and really coming to like a healthy, fruitful place in both of those areas. So it just felt like, it's almost like the happy ending. Like, you just want, let's just end it here. Like, the ending is happy, and that's a good place to end the project.
Right. Well, I'm a little sad to hear Har Di Har is not necessarily going to be a thing anymore. I mean, maybe it'll come back in a few years or something like that. But also at the same time, I'm absolutely ecstatic to hear that you guys are doing well and that you're happy and everything's going the right direction, for lack of a better term. I think that's what everyone strives for and fights for at the end of the day. Externalize and express those things that you were going through. Because isn't that what art is? Expression of the inner self. And I'm also really happy to hear about your house and your kid and yes, what's next? Nothing's next.
No,
I'm teasing.
No, we actually are. We're working on stuff now. I mean, we're working on music together. It's extremely hard because with the baby, and then both of us work, and we work different schedules.
Yeah.
So finding time is challenging, but we are working on something.
Yeah, that is both a musical and a visual project. When we have it, we're working on 3 different pieces that we'll use to launch it. But until they're ready, we're not saying much more outside of that.
Okay.
But there is a new musical artistic endeavor that we are undertaking. It's not Har Di Har.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I won't pry any further, even though I want to.
Sure.
That's absolutely wonderful. Let's dive in a little bit into kind of that change that you guys went through, kind of that realization of going into the next chapter. I know I myself personally have had several realizations like that, and sometimes it's really hard to not necessarily let go, but really hard to move on from what you know, especially when you've been doing it for 10 plus years. So what was that kind of transition like for you guys? I mean, realizing that, hey, let's bounce from this apartment, the band thing is kind of pittering out a little bit, and obviously it took more than just waking up one day and saying, hey, let's change. So what was that transition like for you guys?
Well, I think one of the things that brought it about is thinking about the concept that Jesus talks about in providing fruit, like having fruit happen in your life. And there was a reflection that I was having in that, like, all of the energy around the pursuits of being an artist, it's so challenging because it requires so much time concentrating on the self, on one's own personal goals and desires, and
promoting
self-promotion. It seems that the music industry and entertainment industry in general is one that those who who are best at promoting, at the promotion and these marketing things are the ones that, you know, tend to succeed. And that's not to say that that is wrong, but it was one of those things that I was realizing, it's like so much of my life is being consumed by thinking about ways that I can further my thing. And what resulted was pulling away from family, from community. We were gone a lot. I was worried a lot about balancing making money with the desire to make art, which doesn't, most of the time, doesn't make money. And there's just a sacrifice. Like to make art is there's so much that needs to be sacrificed. Time, sometimes relationships, sometimes deciding on community. The community we were pursuing was all of the people that were involved in the scene, and it was a beautiful thing, but there was so much outside of that that we didn't have the opportunity to invest ourselves in. We had friends in the cities that we just never saw because we were always, you know, busy going to a show, or or we were on tour, or we were working, or we set aside our weekends to write, and there was a fallout of that, in that I certainly, and I think maybe it's for both of us, was not experiencing fruit in our lives. It was kind of the opposite of that. It was just like almost always desperate and always anxious and always self-comparing with others that are achieving what you want to achieve. And before the pandemic, I basically realized that I didn't get into music to spend all this time focusing on myself. I wanted to create music that could help others or benefit others in some way. And I also just, I really love the art making process and wanted to do that. And so I realized, in order to do music, I actually don't need to play shows. We don't need to work on in this scarcity mindset. You can find something to do with your life and also make music and not worry about it being your livelihood. And for me, I realized this happened before the pandemic, but for me, I realized that was teaching music. And that was a real tangible way that I was impacting people, my students, in ways, and investing in them in a new way that I hadn't before, because I was like, well, teaching is my gig to make money, and art making is what I do. And that sort of flipped on itself, in that making art is what I get to do, but teaching and mentoring people and caring for them is what I do, or what I'm called to do.
Well, first off, that's absolutely beautiful. Second, that sounds absolutely fabulous. I love hearing when people go on these journeys of self-discovery and feeling secure in their footing as well. That, to me, it just speaks exponentially about growth and spiritualness. And Andrew, hats off to you for discovering that teaching is where you want to be in life. I myself had to find that balance as well, and life is a massive balancing act. So I'm really glad you guys found that balance and were able to kind of see those rough patches through. That's fabulous. I love that you teach. What do you teach?
I teach, guitar and bass guitar and trombone.
An ensemble.
And small group ensembles, like small bands, writing, songwriting, arranging. Recording, all the fun stuff. I basically try to teach students everything that I learned through the process of going through college and then starting a band and then learning how to record and all the good stuff that no one ever taught me.
Hey, there you go. Very cool. If somebody's interested in reaching out for a lesson or two, how can they do that? Yeah, do you do private lessons, or is it through a school, or...
Yes, I teach at a school in Minneapolis called Music Lab, the Music Lab. But
you also teach privately.
Yes, I also teach privately out of our home, and have done Zoom and FaceTime lessons like that as well. So I would say you could email me at...
Listen, you're findable.
I'm pretty findable. You could message me on my Facebook page, which is just my name, Andrew Thoreen.
Or email or whatever.
Email, which is andrewthoreen@gmail.com.
Pretty much just Google.
Or message me on Instagram. Though I try to not be on Instagram, so sometimes I miss stuff that's there.
Sounds good. Andrew, I'm sorry I put you on the spot, but it sounds
you did? Yeah, you got all flustered.
Yeah. Sounds like Julie swooped in and saved you, though. So
yeah, she did. As she does.
Yeah, so that's a good partnership right there.
I've been very fortunate to have use the natural word of mouth methodology, or people in the neighborhood at school find the school and then find instructors. So I've never really had to try to get the word out about teaching. It's just kind of it just happens.
Mm-hmm. And that to me just speaks volumes. That means that you found your right path.
Yeah, it's I agree. It certainly has been easier than I thought it would.
Julie, how about you? Andrew's talking about teaching and everything else. What kind of journey did you go on? I mean, obviously it was similar since you both live together and you cohabitate and you're married. Discovery, or just kind of seeing what's out there?
It's such an interesting question right now, probably for both of us, just since with having the baby, things changed even further than beforehand. But I probably never, I've gone through seasons where I really want to do, music full time, or, have it be more of a part of my life. But I really struggle with the instability and the volatility of it. And I think just, I'm not a super self-managed person.
Okay.
Andrew's really good at that, but I am not. And I would be I think, I'm like the person who just wants to know that I can do something. And then once I know I can do it, I just move to something else. I don't really master or anything. I'm like a master of none, probably. The only thing that really the through line of it all is our marriage. And even when we started the project, we were the project is, in submission to our marriage. If our relationship needs help, we need to pause the project. And it really has been that tool for us. So I started working in 2015. We had a falling out musically, and I was I'm done. I never want to do this again. I quit Har Di Har. We didn't tell anyone that, but and Andrew really wanted it to keep going. I started working a full-time job, and that, through that 2 years, him writing and me editing We Will You. That's how that came to be. And then after the touring cycle, the last touring cycle, I was still sort of working and trying to figure out, I've always wanted to run a business. That's been something that's really I've wanted for a long time. And I got laid off during the pandemic at the place where I was. And long story short, I won't get into it, but through that experience, I ended up, getting the opportunity to run a business, and, in some ways a dream come true for me. But, as so often happens, when you get the thing that you want, you realize and we have the baby now. It's I don't really want to run a company anymore. And ultimately, I really want to support Andrew in whatever way I can as we figure out how to be a family. And, that's about as clear as mud. But that's about as clear as it is in my head right now, too. Just knowing that I want to be the best spouse and mother that I can be. And
yeah, something interesting that you said, Julie. You said when you get something that you're chasing after and that you want, all of a sudden you get it, and it's kind of oh, well, maybe that's not all it's cracked up to be, or that's not exactly what I envisioned. So yes, Julie, I fully understand, and hats off to you for going for it. And that's putting Har Di Har on the back burner for now, which I'm a little sad about, but that's okay.
I think the moral of the story and everything is what we've learned, that contentment, which, really that's what everyone's striving for, is that, balance and contentment and inner peace and whatever you want to call it. But it isn't possible. External circumstances it's not about having the right external circumstances, because you'll just keep chasing the thing, and you'll get the thing, and then it won't be good enough at that point in time. It's really, becoming unflappable regardless of, your external circumstances, and that takes, an inner strength and discipline. That's not something that comes easy, and maybe, I would argue isn't even humanly possible to, like, regardless of any and all circumstance, you maintain a level of peace and contentment, and not just like sort of grin and bear it, but like a joy and delight for your life.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, thank you so much for talking philosophical and spiritual with me here. Thank you.
Anytime.
But yeah, hey, I'm here for it. I love talking about this stuff, but let's get back to it. How has this EP been received? You've alluded that this is kind of a closure EP. You're leaving it on a high note.
My mom asked me this question. I really didn't know how to answer it. What she was asking was like more so like, how are you doing about that with this release? I don't know. Besides people reaching out, texting us and just saying that they are appreciating the songs or digging the songs, like I don't really know. And that's kind of it's the beauty and also the challenge of something having such a impersonal metric that is like a number behind streaming,
Okay.
Like we know a certain amount of people have listened to it. We have no idea how they're interacting with it unless they choose to reach out to us and let us know. I'm very happy with, I guess it's not really interacting with the EP as much as it is being excited for us,
I just wanted to get it out. That was like my metric of success. But
Yeah.
I think what's been cool about this EP, and we've received, DMs before after releasing music, people saying, "Oh, this is really good, like, really like it," or whatever. But with this one, we were, the content of the EP is like more explicitly like spiritual and religious, and we've been more so in our posting. And I think having people reach out and not just like a, hey, thanks for the songs, but actually like a dialogue and conversation. We've had a number of people reach out to us that wouldn't have otherwise, I don't think, and been able to have really unexpected and rich conversations that are still going on today. So to me, that's a huge success because that's what we all desire. I mean, everyone who puts art out, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but, a lot of times you want to move the people who receive it in some way, shape, or form. It's just been very cool that it's a dialogue, that we're a part of that person's life now in a way we weren't before. That's very cool.
Yeah. So it sounds like this album has garnered a lot of connections.
That's a good way to say that.
Yeah, and so that's amazing to hear that this EP has garnered that for you guys. That's absolutely amazing. What are some of the conversations that you're having with people? What kind of connections have you made?
Because there is, some like, I would say, I guess, mildly religious content on the EP. And also, like I said, our posts have been more explicit in that nature as well, in terms of us becoming Christians essentially through the pandemic. Those conversations have been, as they should be and as we want them to be, like very rich, and people reaching out with, questions about that and, surprised and wanting to know more and maybe expressing sort of where they're at with things. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah. A lot of people just kind of asking, like, why did you write a song that has Jesus in the title? Gives us the opportunity to talk about that. That is a lot more challenging to do with a post on social media, to get at all of everything behind that, what caused us to become Christians in 2020, essentially.
Would you label yourself Christian before 2020, or kind of how did that come about? Because now I'm curious. I mean, I understand how it came about. The globe was in a pandemic. Nobody knew if they'd have a job tomorrow, and the world was in turmoil. I totally understand that, but I guess from a different standpoint, I mean, were you always kind of more Christian based, and now it's just coming to a fruition?
I guess the idea was always appealing. You could maybe label it as, I don't think these are fully, I mean, they're just words. Notionally, like,
or just like the idea of, the challenge is it's such a complex conversation, but really, neither of us we were not, we both have different journeys, obviously, because we're different people, but, it's very hard to understand, but I became, desiring to follow Christ when in like 2008, but I didn't, and that's something that I was alluding to with our music before, of like not really knowing what I was talking about spiritually, and kind of just like, I didn't know anything about anything. And I would say, if you had asked me point blank, 5 years ago, are you a Christian? I would have said yes, but I didn't actually know what that meant, or I didn't have really any understanding. It was a spiritual experience I had that did like change the trajectory of my life. But I think it was really like, it actually was right before the pandemic, when my life really hit the fan. If you read some of the things in the Bible, they're just like, this can't be real. I mean, it's crazy. Some of the things that it says are possible. And I think to dare to believe that actually might be true is really, without going into grave detail, basically it was like, I either believe this is true and potentially, have life, or I am going to, like, life will be this continued cycle of despair and darkness that I was living in at the time. So, and that was like in February of 2020, right before, the world kind of spun into oblivion. And then, Andrew has his own journey that kind of that came into place after that. And I think after seeing real transformation in my life, it was like, oh, like maybe this is more than just words on a page, or like a good teaching, or, sort of two-dimensional.
Most of my thinking around Christianity was based on what people were telling me it was, as opposed to like actually going and like finding out for myself and studying scripture. So that's the easiest way for me to describe it, is that it was a journey of me actually going to the text and grappling with it and learning through that process, as opposed to just relying on others to tell me what it was.
Okay, so it's more of a journey of not necessarily self-discovery, that's not the words that I want to use, but it's a journey of self-realization, I guess. Self-realization in yourselves and what it means to be Christian. Right?
Yeah.
In a way. In a way. This is a really big philosophical conversation, and I'm trying to mirror it to my own experiences and my own life. But my own life doesn't involve the church, so I'm trying to put it into the context that I can understand, because I truly believe that all religions have the same base. Love thy neighbor and So trying to kind of mirror that in my own experiences and my own beliefs, but not necessarily having the Christian faith behind it.
Sure.
So yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to allude to, and do not worry, I will be editing this. So I can take out of all my ums and ers and things like that. So
no worries, we're whatever you want to do.
Yeah, maybe the only way that I can think about it is that it only occurred because it was something outside of myself.
Okay.
And not reliant on only myself.
Yeah, one of the teachings, and again, we're in some ways we're getting off track, but in other ways we're right on track.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the unique thing about the Christian faith is that it's not about what you do. In fact, there's nothing you can do to be good, to be right with God. That's just not possible. And the only way that has become possible is through the Holy Spirit, what the Scripture calls the Holy Spirit, which is Christ's Spirit that's been placed in you when you believe that that God exists, and Jesus was a real person who came and was God in the flesh, and he died on the cross for the sin of the world, and then was resurrected, and took on basically what we took on everything that we deserved to take. Now there is no punishment anymore, condemnation. That we actually, if we believe it in this gift, that we are actually like wholly justified and without blemish before God. So we're good now. We're right, just by faith alone, and which is in and of itself crazy and it's like offensive actually in a lot of ways. But the way we do that isn't by anything that we do, any striving or any action on the self. It's actually the Holy Spirit, which that is the piece that I missed first go around, and having that actually occur in my life for real and transform me very quickly and profoundly. And then seeing that happen in Andrew just, months later, it really, there would be no way we could not believe it, because it had such a profound and real impact and continues to in our life. And certainly in ways, if you told us 15 years ago, we would laugh in your face, most definitely. But here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So on this EP, did you guys do the recording yourselves, or did you go to a studio?
Yes, both of those questions.
We did not go to a studio.
Shane's studio.
Oh, that's right. The drums. That's
and it depends on if you define our attic as a studio.
Yeah, that's true. We did the recording ourselves, though, except for the drum.
Yeah.
Our friend Shane did the drums.
Yeah, we built an attic in our studio. We built we built a studio in our attic that we recorded the majority of the stuff in, and then except for the drums on I Love You, I Am For You, and My All. Shane Leonard, who I had worked with for years, playing with the songwriter J.E. Sunday. He has built a wonderful studio, converted his garage into a studio. He lives in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and he's a top-notch musician and engineer and drummer and human being. And we basically just booked one day for him to do. No, I think it might have been 2 days. He did the drums on 3 songs in 2 days and knocked it out of the park. And
then we got it mixed by our friend Brett Bullion, who we worked with on We Will You, and we weren't about to mix because we know very little about that and wanted his touch on it. But we didn't go into the studio for that. He just did that, remotely, essentially.
Yeah. Fabulous. And isn't it amazing that you can do things like that completely remotely now?
Yeah.
It was actually weird, because we actually did the the notes, or I don't know.
We weren't in the same room. And
we never were.
Notes.
We did mixing notes, not in the same room. It was
over the phone.
Over the phone, texting.
No, it was over. Yeah, it was over text.
It was very odd, and I'll admit I hated it. But whatever. You gotta do what you gotta do.
That's really interesting to hear, and it just goes to show how much has changed with technology and the times and things like that. I mean, Andrew, you even said earlier that you can do lessons via Zoom if somebody can't meet. I mean, I don't know. I just find it really cool.
Oh, it's been great for taking vacations, because we'll go somewhere, go to my parents, or go to Andrew's parents have a cabin right now, and go to the cabin for a week and get to continue working, because it's hard to take a whole week off. And
it's great, and it's also not great, because it pales in comparison to being in the same room as somebody. At least for teaching, I loathe teaching online lessons, but I had to deal with it during the pandemic, and I think I got decent at doing it. Being in the room playing with somebody, you really can't. I don't know. You cannot do that very well.
Guys, Julie, Andrew, thank you both so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me in the wider world about Har Di Har and your new EP and philosophical cognizance. Thank you guys both so much, and have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you both soon.
Thank you so much, Crystal. It was really a pleasure. We appreciate your openness and just desire to chat. Super cool.
Yeah. you, Crystal.
What would happen if you leave? What would happen if you stop? What would happen if you go away? And what if the internet goes out? I think of codependency as a wonderful thing. What would happen? What happens to me? What happens to me? What just happened? Did you leave? Did I do a thing to make you stop? Will it change you? There's been a while. And what if the internet goes out? Will you seem too different to me? Like a stranger thing. What will happen? What's happening? What's happening to me? What's happening to